The morning sun cast long shadows across the ancient stones of Westminster Abbey. London was waking up to a day that would change history forever. Inside the Abbey, workers moved quietly as they made final preparations for something nobody had expected to happen so soon. King Charles III had shocked the entire world just months before. In a television broadcast that left millions speechless, he announced his decision to step down from the throne. His reign had been brief but meaningful. Now he was passing the crown to his eldest son in a move that royal experts called unprecedented. In modern times, the decision came as a surprise to everyone, including Prince William himself. For decades, he had prepared for the day he would become king. But he always thought it would happen much later in life, perhaps when he was in his 60s or 70s like his father had been. Instead, at 42 years old, he was about to accept the heaviest responsibility any person could carry, Westminster. Abbey had seen 40 monarchs crowned within its sacred walls. The building itself seemed to breathe with the weight of centuries. Every stone had witnessed moments that shaped not just Britain, but the entire world. Today, it would add another chapter to its remarkable story. The preparations had been going on 4 weeks. Royal staff worked day and night to organize everything perfectly. The ceremony had to follow traditions that were hundreds of years old, but it also needed to feel right for the modern world. Every detail mattered because billions of people would be watching in the ornate preparation chamber deep inside the Abbey. Prince William stood before a large mirror. His reflection showed a man who looked older than his years, marked by the weight of responsibility he already carried. The military uniform that would be part of his ceremony hung nearby, perfectly pressed and ready. Next to it, the ceremonial robes lay across an antique chair that had been used by kings for generations. Each golden thread in those robes told a story. They had been worn by monarchs who faced wars, plagues, and great changes in their times. Some had been loved by their people, others had struggled with their duties. All had carried the same burden that William was about to accept. The weight of millions of lives depending on his decisions and leadership. William touched the fabric gently, feeling the smoothness of silk and the roughness of golden embroidery. His fingers traced patterns that craftsmen had sewn decades before his birth. These robes connected him to every king who had come before him. They were more than just clothes. They were symbols of continuity and duty that stretched back through centuries. The sounds of London came through the thick stone walls. Even this early in the morning, crowds were gathering in the streets outside. People had been arriving for days, camping on sidewalks and in parks. They brought sleeping bags and folding chairs, British flags, and homemade signs. Many had traveled from other countries just to be part of this historic moment. Street vendors were already busy selling souvenirs to the growing crowds. Mugs with William's face, small British flags, t-shirts with royal symbols, and special commemorative items created just for this day. The atmosphere outside was electric with excitement. People who had never met before were talking like old friends, united by their shared anticipation of witnessing history. Inside the Abbey, the final preparations continued. The Archbishop of Canterbury reviewed his ancient notes one more time. Every word he would speak during the ceremony had been carefully chosen and practiced. He knew that his voice would carry these words to every corner of the world through television and radio broadcasts. The responsibility felt enormous. Dignitaries from 193 countries were already taking their seats. Presidents and prime ministers had flown thousands of miles to be here. As members of royal families from other nations sat in their designated places. The seating arrangement alone had taken months to plan, ensuring that protocol was followed while keeping everyone comfortable. The Abbey was filling with nearly 2,000 guests. Each person had been carefully chosen and invited. Some were there because of their official positions, others because of their contributions to society. All understood they were about to witness something that would be remembered for generations. Security was unlike anything London had ever seen. Police officers were everywhere, many of them visible, but many more working behind the scenes. Every bag was checked, every person screened multiple times. The safety of so many world leaders in one place required perfect planning and execution. Television crews from around the world had been setting up their equipment for days. Cameras were positioned to capture every angle of the ceremony. Commentators from different countries prepared to explain the traditions and significance to their audiences back home. This would be one of the most watched events in television. History, in a smaller room connected to the main preparation chamber, 3 children waited patiently. Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis were dressed in their finest ceremonial clothes. They understood that today their father was becoming something more than just their dad. The weight of this change showed in their young faces, but they also carried themselves with remarkable dignity. Catherine entered the preparation chamber quietly. Her presence immediately changed the atmosphere in the room. William's nervous energy seemed to calm just from seeing her. She had been his anchor through years of royal duties and public appearances. Today marked their greatest challenge yet, but they would face it together. She was dressed in an elegant gown that honored both tradition and her own personal style. Every detail of her appearance had been planned carefully, knowing that millions of women around the world would study every choice she made. But beneath all the formal planning, she remained the woman who had supported William through everything. The bells of Westminster Abbey began to ring across London, ancient voices calling the city to attention. These same bells had rung for coronations, weddings, and funerals for hundreds of years. Today they announced the beginning of a new reign and the UHL's continuation of a tradition that connected modern Britain to its deepest roots. The crowds outside Westminster Abbey grew larger as the morning progressed. People who had been waiting since dawn were now joined by thousands more streaming through London streets. The energy was building like electricity in the air before a storm. Everyone could feel that something extraordinary was about to happen. Families had come from all across Britain and beyond. Parents held young children on their shoulders so they could see over the crowds. Elderly people sat in folding chairs they had brought from home, many wrapped in blankets despite the spring weather. Teenagers took endless photos and videos, sharing their excitement with friends around the world through social media. The diversity of the crowd was remarkable. People of all ages, backgrounds, and nationalities had come together for this moment. Some wore traditional British clothing, others dressed in the ceremonial outfits of their own cultures. What united them all was the understanding that they were about to witness something that would be talked about for generations. Food vendors moved through the crowds, selling hot tea, sandwiches, and snacks to people who had been waiting for hours. The smell of fresh bread and brewing tea mixed with the crisp morning air. Despite the massive numbers of people, the atmosphere remained friendly and patient. Strangers shared food and stories, creating temporary friendships born from shared anticipation. Police officers worked their way through the crowds, keeping everyone safe while maintaining the festive atmosphere. Many of the officers were smiling and chatting with the waiting people. They understood this was a joyful occasion, not a threatening one. The security was tight but not oppressive, allowing people to enjoy the historic moment. Inside the abbey, William's thoughts drifted to his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II. She had reigned for 70 years, with dignity and grace that earned respect around the world. Her death had marked the end of an era, but her teachings about duty and service lived on through her family. He could almost feel her presence in the ancient building, watching over him as he prepared to accept the crown she had worn for so long. He remembered her final words to him about the responsibility of leadership. She had told him that being king was not about power or privilege, but about service to others. The crown was not a prize to be won, but a burden to be carried with honor. Her voice seemed to echo in his mind as he prepared to take on that burden. Catherine stood beside him now, her presence a source of strength and comfort. They had faced many challenges together during their years of marriage and royal duty. She had transformed from a young woman unsure of her place in the royal world into a confident leader who could handle any situation. Today, she would become queen consort. Sharing the burden of leadership that William was about to accept, their children waited in the nearby room, remarkably calm for such a momentous occasion. Prince George, as the eldest, understood more about what was happening then, his younger siblings. He would someday face this same ceremony himself, but for now, he was simply a boy watching his father become king. Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis were excited by all the activity and attention, but they too seemed to understand the importance of the day. The processional music began to play, filling the abbey with sounds that had marked royal ceremonies for centuries. The orchestra and choir had practiced for weeks to ensure every note was perfect. Their music would be heard by billions of people around the world, carrying the ceremony beyond the stone walls of the abbey to homes and gathering places on every continent. Television cameras captured every moment as William made his entrance down the ancient aisle. His footsteps echoed through the sacred space, each one taking him closer to his destiny. The 2,000 guests in the abbey represented every part of British society and the international community. Their presence showed the global significance of this moment. Catherine followed behind William, her elegant dress flowing gracefully with each step. She had chosen clothing that honored both tradition and her own personal style. Every detail had been carefully considered, knowing that her appearance would be studied and remembered for generations. But beneath all the formal planning, she remained focused on supporting her husband through this life-changing moment. The children walked behind their parents with remarkable composure for their young ages. Prince George looked serious and focused, understanding the weight of the occasion. Princess Charlotte smiled at some of the guests she recognized, while Prince Louis seemed fascinated by all the pageantry surrounding him. Their natural behavior added a human touch to the ancient ceremony. World leaders and dignitaries watched from their seats as the royal family proceeded down the aisle. Many had attended similar ceremonies in their own countries, but the combination of British tradition and global significance made this coronation unique. The history contained within Westminster Abbey's walls seemed to embrace everyone present. Television commentators around the world described the scene for their audiences. In Australia, families had gathered before dawn to watch the ceremony. Together, in Canada, community centers hosted viewing parties where people could share the experience. In India, despite the complex colonial history between the countries, millions watched with curious interest as British tradition unfolded. Social media platforms struggled to handle the massive traffic as people shared their real-time reactions to the ceremony. Photos and videos were being posted faster than the systems could process them. Hashtags related to the coronation became the most used in social media history, crossing language and cultural barriers as people around the world participated in this shared moment. The Archbishop of Canterbury stepped forward as William reached the altar. This was the moment when centuries of tradition would meet the reality of modern leadership. The Archbishop had studied every word of the ancient ceremony, but he also understood that this coronation needed to speak to people living in the 21st century. A balance between honoring the past and embracing the future would define this entire ceremony. William knelt before the altar as millions of people held their breath. The weight of the moment was felt, not just by those present in the abbey, but by everyone watching around the world. This was more than just a ceremony. It was the moment when one man accepted responsibility for the welfare and guidance of hundreds of millions of people across dozens of countries. The holy oil used for the anointing had been prepared according to a secret recipe dating back 8 centuries. The ingredients were the same ones used for every monarch who had knelt in this same spot. This connection to the past gave the ceremony a depth that went beyond pageantry or politics. It was a spiritual moment that transformed an ordinary person into something greater. As the Archbishop began the anointing process, applying the sacred oil to William's hands, chest, and forehead, the abbey fell into complete silence. Even the youngest children in the congregation seemed to understand that something profound was happening. This was the most sacred part of the entire ceremony, the moment when divine blessing met human responsibility. The silence in the abbey was so complete that people could hear their own heartbeats. Outside, the massive crowds had also grown quiet, understanding through some collective instinct that the most important moment of the ceremony was taking place. Even the birds seemed to have stopped singing, as if all of London was holding its breath in anticipation of what was about to happen. Next, the St. Edward's crown was lifted from its velvet cushion with the reverence reserved for the most sacred objects. Crafted from solid gold, and adorned with precious gems collected over centuries. It caught streams of colored light from the abbey's magnificent stained glass windows. The crown weighed nearly 5 pounds, but its true weight came from the history and responsibility it represented. Every person in Westminster Abbey understood they were witnessing the most important moment of the ceremony. The Archbishop of Canterbury held the crown high above William's head, and in that instant, the silence became so profound it seemed to press against the ancient stone walls. Nearly 2,000 people held their breath in perfect unison, while billions more around the world leaned forward toward their television screens. The crown began its slow descent toward William's head. Each inch it moved downward marked the passage from one era to another. When it finally came to rest on his brow, something extraordinary happened that nobody had expected. A single tear rolled down William's cheek, clearly visible to the cameras that were broadcasting this moment to every corner of the earth. The tear was not born from sadness, but from an overwhelming flood of emotions that crashed over him all. At once, grief for his grandmother, who could not witness this moment. Gratitude for the journey that had brought him here. Determination to honor the trust being placed in him by millions of people, and a profound understanding of what his life would become from this moment forward. News. Anchors around the world fell silent as they watched this unexpected display of raw human emotion within an ancient ritual. The tear caught the light from the stained glass windows, making it seem to glow as it traced a path down his face. In that moment, William was not just a king being crowned, but a man accepting the heaviest burden any person could carry. The image of that single tear spread across social media faster than anything in the platform's history. People shared their own emotional reactions to seeing such genuine feeling in the middle of a ceremony steeped in centuries of tradition. Young people who had never cared about the monarchy suddenly understood that this is about a human being accepting lifetime service to millions of strangers in British homes across the country. Families found themselves unexpectedly moved by what they were witnessing. Parents pointed to their television screens and told their children they were watching history being made. Elderly people who had seen many royal ceremonies admitted that this one felt different. It's more personal and authentic than anything they remembered from the past. The congregation in Westminster Abbey remained in respectful silence as the final blessings were pronounced over the newly crowned king. Even those who had attended countless royal ceremonies throughout their lives recognized that something special was happening. The combination of ancient tradition and genuine emotion created an atmosphere that transcended political opinions about monarchy. Catherine watched from her seat nearby, seeing her husband in a completely new light as he accepted responsibilities that would define the rest of their lives together. She had known this day would come eventually, but witnessing the actual moment of transformation was more powerful than she had imagined. The man she married was becoming something greater, and she would be part of that journey. King William V stood to face his people for the first time wearing the crown. The physical weight on his head was nothing compared to the weight of expectation he felt from the hundreds of faces before him and the millions watching worldwide. As he looked out at the congregation, he found strength in their presence and hope in their silent support for the journey he was beginning. The planned silence that should have followed the crowning was broken by something that had never happened in a coronation ceremony before. Spontaneous applause began with a single person somewhere in the middle of the abbey. Like ripples spreading across water, the clapping spread throughout the ancient building until every person was participating in this unplanned expression of joy and support. The Archbishop smiled as he watched the applause grow, recognizing that sometimes the most meaningful parts of great ceremonies are those that happen naturally from the heart rather than from centuries of protocol. The applause was not just for the new king, but for the authentic emotion he had shared with the world in his moment of greatest responsibility. Outside Westminster Abbey, the crowds that had been waiting in respectful silence erupted in celebration when they heard the applause from inside. The sound echoed off the ancient buildings surrounding the abbey, creating a symphony of joy that seemed to lift the very stones of London. Police officers who were known for their professional reserve were seen smiling and clapping along with the enthusiastic crowds, the newly crowned king's first words were simple but powerful. Speaking without prepared notes, he thanked the people for their presence and patience, acknowledging the trust they were placing in him. His voice carried clearly through the abbey's perfect acoustics, reaching every person in the building, and, through broadcast technology, every corner of the globe where people were watching. He spoke about service rather than power, about responsibility rather than privilege. His words were direct and honest, without the formal language that had marked royal speeches in the past. People listening could hear the genuine emotion in his voice, the same authenticity that had been visible in that single tear during the crowning moment. International reaction was swift and largely positive. World leaders who had initially been skeptical about attending found themselves genuinely moved by what they had witnessed. Many later said the ceremony had exceeded their expectations and changed their understanding of what modern monarchy could represent in the 21st century. The ceremony became one of the most watched events in television history. But more importantly, it engaged young people worldwide, who shared clips of William's emotional moment in his natural interactions with his children. Social media was filled with positive comments from people who had never shown interest in royal events before. Television ratings showed that the coronation had reached audiences that normally ignored royal ceremonies. The authentic emotion displayed by the new king had broken through the barriers that often separated the monarchy from ordinary people. Viewers felt they had witnessed something real and meaningful, not just ancient pageantry. As the formal ceremony concluded, preparations began for the procession to Buckingham Palace. The Golden State Coach, used for royal ceremonies for over 2 centuries, waited outside the Abbey. The journey through London streets would give thousands more people the chance to see their new king and share in this historic moment. The atmosphere inside Westminster Abbey began to shift as guests prepared to leave. The most sacred part of the day was complete, but the celebration was just beginning. The new king and his family would soon emerge to greet the crowds that had waited so patiently to be part of this extraordinary day. Staff, members who had worked for years to prepare for this moment, allowed themselves brief smiles of satisfaction. Every detail had been executed perfectly, but the most memorable parts of the ceremony had been the unplanned ones. The tear, the spontaneous applause, and the genuine emotion that had touched millions of people around the world. The bells of Westminster Abbey began to ring again, their ancient voices now announcing the beginning of a new reign. As the sound carried across London and was broadcast around the world, it marked not just the end of the coronation ceremony, but the beginning of what many hoped would be a new era for the British monarchy. The procession from Westminster Abbey to Buckingham Palace began as the Golden State Coach emerged from the shadow of the ancient building. The coach itself was a masterpiece of craftsmanship. It's built over 2 centuries ago and used for the most important royal ceremonies. Its gold decorations caught the morning sunlight, creating flashes of brilliance that seemed to announce the arrival of a new era. Inside the coach, King William sat with his family, still wearing the heavy crown that had transformed his life. Just minutes before, children pressed their faces to the windows, amazed by the crowds that lined every street as far as they could see. Catherine sat beside William, her presence steady and calming as it had been throughout their marriage and royal duties. The crowds along the procession route had been building since dawn, but now they reached numbers that surprised even experienced police officers. People filled not just the sidewalks, but every available space where they could catch a glimpse of their new king. They climbed lampposts, stood on barriers, and filled the windows of every building along the route. What made this procession different from others was the spontaneous interaction between the royal family and the people. The coach made unplanned stops whenever children could be seen waiting with flowers or homemade signs. William stepped out multiple times to accept gifts and greet families who had traveled great distances to be part of this day. At one stop, a little girl no more than 5 years old had been waiting with her grandmother, holding a small bouquet of daisies picked from their garden. When William knelt down to accept the flowers and speak with her, she whispered something that made him laugh genuinely. The moment was captured by dozens of cameras and became one of the most shared images of the day. Another memorable stop happened when William noticed an elderly veteran in a wheelchair, wearing his military medals with obvious pride. "Ishtanu." King walked over and spent several minutes talking with the man about his service. The veteran's face showed pure joy at this unexpected recognition. The crowd around them erupted in respectful applause. These interactions were not part of the planned schedule, but they perfectly captured the kind of King William intended to be. His security team worked frantically to adjust their plans, but they could see that these spontaneous moments were creating exactly the right impression for the new reign. The king was showing himself to be approachable and genuinely interested in his people. Social media exploded with videos and photos of these unplanned interactions. People who had been skeptical about the monarchy found themselves moved by the genuine warmth William showed to everyone he met. Comments poured in from around the world, praising the new king's natural ability to connect with people of all ages and backgrounds. The crowds grew thicker and more enthusiastic as the procession moved through central London. People who had not originally planned to attend found themselves drawn to the streets by the infectious energy of the celebration. Office workers came down from their buildings. Shopkeepers closed their stores to join the festivities. And even construction workers stopped their projects to wave from scaffolding. Street vendors moved through the crowds, selling commemorative items, but many people were more interested in simply being present for this historic moment. They waved British flags, sang patriotic songs, and shared their excitement with complete strangers. The usual reserve associated with British crowds had given way to open celebration and joy. International news crews working their way through. The crowds reported that the atmosphere was unlike anything they had experienced at previous royal events. There was a sense of renewal and hope that seemed to energize everyone present. People spoke about feeling proud to be British in a way they had not felt for many years. The Golden State coach continued its journey through London, but the pace was slower than planned due to all the stops and interactions. Palace officials made quick decisions to extend the route slightly, allowing even more people to see their new king. The schedule could be adjusted, but this opportunity to connect with the people came only once. As the procession approached Buckingham Palace, the crowds became so dense that progress slowed to barely walking speed. The famous mall was packed from side to side with people who had been waiting for hours to witness this moment. The sound of their cheering created a wall of noise that could be heard miles away. The palace staff had prepared for large crowds, but the numbers exceeded all their expectations. Emergency plans were activated to ensure everyone's safety, while still allowing as many people as possible to participate in the celebration. Additional barriers were brought in, and more police officers were deployed to manage the massive gathering. The atmosphere around Buckingham Palace was electric with anticipation. Everyone knew that the traditional balcony appearance would provide the final image of a day that had already exceeded all expectations. The balcony where the royal family would appear had been specially decorated for the occasion, so the focus would clearly be on the people rather than the decorations. Inside the palace, staff members who had served the royal family for decades admitted that they had never experienced anything quite like this. The energy from the crowds outside seemed to penetrate the thick palace walls. Even the most formal protocol officers were smiling as they made final preparations for the balcony appearance. The new king and his family arrived at the palace too, find thousands of staff members lined up to greet them. From senior courtiers to kitchen workers, everyone wanted to be part of welcoming their new monarch home. William made a point of speaking with people at every level, showing the same genuine interest he had displayed with the crowds outside. Catherine and the children were taken to prepare for the balcony appearance while William met briefly with senior palace officials. The day had gone better than anyone had dared hope, but there was still the most public moment of all to come. The balcony appearance would be seen by the largest crowd of the day and broadcast live around the world. The famous balcony at Buckingham Palace had been the site of countless historic moments. It was where the royal family appeared after weddings, during national celebrations, and at times of crisis or triumph. Today, it would frame the first public appearance of King William V with his family, setting the tone for his entire reign. As the time for the balcony appearance approached, the crowds in front of the palace grew even larger. People pressed forward, hoping to get the best possible view of their new king. The police worked to maintain order while allowing the celebration to continue. Understanding that this was a joyous occasion that deserved to be shared by as many people as possible. The noise from the crowd was constant now, a mixture of cheering, singing, and general celebration that created a soundtrack for this historic day. British flags waved everywhere, but there were also flags from Commonwealth countries and other nations, showing the international significance of what was happening. Television. Cameras positioned around the palace captured every angle of the massive celebration. Commentators struggled to describe the scale and energy of what they were witnessing. Many said it was the largest and most enthusiastic crowd they had ever seen at a royal event. Reflecting the genuine connection people felt with their new king, the moment was approaching when King William V would appear on the balcony with his family, providing the final image of a coronation day that had already become legendary. The crowds fell into expectant silence, thousands of faces turned upward, toward the famous balcony where so much history had been made. The balcony doors at Buckingham Palace opened to reveal King William V and his family stepping into the afternoon sunlight. The roar from the massive crowd below was immediate and overwhelming, a sound that seemed to shake the very foundations of the historic building. Thousands of faces looked up expectantly, and millions more watched through television screens around the world. William still wore the St. Edward's crown, its gold surface gleaming in the sunlight. Catherine stood beside him in her elegant dress, now also wearing a smaller crown that marked her new role as queen consort. The three children flanked their parents, Prince George looking serious and aware of the importance of the moment, while Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis seemed excited by the noise and spectacle below. The crowd's enthusiasm was infectious. People waved flags, threw hats in the air, and cheered with voices that had already been strained by hours of celebration. The energy rose from the masses of people like heat from a fire, creating an atmosphere of pure joy that enveloped everyone present. This was not just ceremony anymore, genuine celebration. King William waved to the crowd, his face showing the same authentic emotion that had marked his coronation ceremony. The formal distance that often existed between royalty and the public seemed to have dissolved completely. When he smiled, the crowd erupted in even louder cheers, as if they were responding to a friend rather than a distant monarch. The children's presence on the balcony added a special dimension to the moment. People in the crowd pointed up at them, delighting in their natural reactions to the overwhelming spectacle. Prince George waved formally, understanding his position, while his younger siblings were more spontaneous in their responses to the crowd's energy. Then something happened that would become the most remembered image of the entire day. Prince Louis, the youngest of the three children, became overwhelmed by the noise and spectacle below. The constant roar of the crowd, combined with the heat and excitement of the day, proved too much for the young prince. He began to cry, his small face crumpling with exhaustion and overstimulation. Without a moment's hesitation, King William knelt down and lifted his son into his arms. While wearing the crown that symbolized his authority over millions of people, he whispered comfort into his child's ear, rocking him gently while still acknowledging the crowd below. The image of the powerful monarch comforting his crying child captured something essential about the man behind the crown. The crowd fell silent for a moment, touched by this display of fatherly love in the midst of such grand ceremony. Then the applause began again, but this time it was different. It was not just appreciation for the pageantry and tradition, but genuine affection for a king who showed himself to be, above all else, a caring father. Photographers captured the moment from dozens of angles, but the most powerful images were the wide shots that showed the tiny figures on the balcony against the vast sea of people below. The contrast emphasized both the magnitude of William's new responsibilities and the human scale of his response to his child's distress. Social media immediately exploded with reactions to the balcony moment. The image of King William holding his crying son while wearing the crown of office became the most shared royal photograph in social media history. Comments poured in from around the world, people praising the new king's natural parenting instincts and his ability to balance duty with family love. Parents everywhere identified with William's immediate response to his child's distress. The moment transcended royal ceremony and became something universally human. People who had never cared about the monarchy found themselves moved by seeing such genuine parental love displayed on the world stage. Catherine stood beside her husband, her face showing pride in his instinctive reaction to their son's needs. She had watched William grow into his royal role over the years, but this moment showed qualities that went beyond duty or training. This was the man she had married, responding with natural love and care to his family's needs. The traditional Royal Air Force flyover provided the spectacular finale that had been planned for months. Fighter jets and transport aircraft, including some that William had piloted during his military service, streaked overhead in perfect formation. The precision and power of the aircraft created a dramatic backdrop for the balcony scene below. King William's face lit up with genuine pleasure as he recognized aircraft types he had flown during his years of military service. Still holding Prince Louis, he pointed excitedly at the planes, momentarily forgetting the formality of the occasion to share his enthusiasm with his children. This spontaneous reaction showed yet another side of the new king's personality. Flyover lasted several minutes, with different formations of aircraft passing over Buckingham Palace in carefully timed sequences. The sound of the jet engines mixed with the cheers of the crowd, creating a symphony of celebration that seemed to embrace all of London. The aircraft represented the military that William would now command as their king. Prince Louis had stopped crying and was now fascinated by the aircraft overhead. His father's calm presence and the distraction of the flyover had worked their magic. The little prince pointed at the planes with excitement, his earlier distress completely forgotten in the wonder of the aerial display. The crowd below watched the entire scene with delight, from the tender moment of comfort to the excitement over the aircraft. They were witnessing a king who could handle both the grand, ceremonial aspects of his role and the simple human moments that arose unexpectedly. This balance would define his approach to monarchy as the flyover concluded. The royal family remained on the balcony for several more minutes, waving to the crowd and enjoying the celebration. The children had found their comfort zone now, waving enthusiastically and pointing out interesting sights in the massive gathering below. Their natural behavior continued to charm everyone watching. International news coverage focused heavily on the balcony appearance, with commentators noting how different this felt from previous royal ceremonies. The combination of grand tradition and authentic family moments had created something that felt both timeless and thoroughly contemporary. This was monarchy adapted for the modern world. The economic impact of the day was already becoming clear as tourism to Britain spiked dramatically. Hotels reported unprecedented bookings from people who wanted to visit the places where they had witnessed history being made. The positive international coverage was generating interest in British culture and history that tourism officials had not seen in decades. Commonwealth nations that had been considering Republican movements found their populations newly engaged with the monarchy. Opinion polls conducted in the hours after the coronation showed significant increases in royal family support, particularly among younger demographics who connected with the authenticity they had witnessed during the ceremony and balcony appearance. The image of King William comforting his crying child while wearing the symbols of office became symbolic of a new kind of monarchy. Royal commentators noted that this single moment had accomplished more for the institution's reputation than years of traditional public relations efforts. It showed a monarch who understood both the weight of his responsibilities and the importance of human connection. As evening approached and the crowds began to disperse, the full impact of the day started to become clear. This had been more than just a coronation ceremony. It had been a transformation of how people viewed the monarchy and its place in the modern world. The authentic emotion displayed throughout the day had created a new bond between the royal family and the public. Street cleaning crews began the massive task of clearing up after the largest crowd in London's recent history. But even as people headed home, many lingered in the streets, reluctant to let go of the magical atmosphere that had enveloped the city. Strangers who had shared the day's experiences exchanged contact information. Promising to stay in touch, the palace staff worked late into the evening, processing the thousands of gifts and messages that had been delivered throughout the Day. Letters came from every continent, expressing support and admiration for the new king and his family. Many specifically mentioned the balcony moment, calling it proof that the monarchy remained relevant and human. International diplomatic reports praised the day as a masterclass in soft power, showing how the British monarchy could project influence through authentic, human connection rather than just ceremony and tradition. World leaders who had attended found themselves speaking positively about their experience, many noting how the day had exceeded their expectations. The Coronation hashtag remained the most used in social media history throughout the evening and into the following days. People continued sharing their favorite moments, with the balcony scene in William's terror during the crowning ceremony generating the most emotional responses. The global conversation showed how effectively the day had resonated across different cultures and generations. Television ratings confirmed that the coronation had become one of the most watched events in broadcasting history. But more significant than the numbers was the engagement it had generated. Viewers had not just watched passively, but had actively participated through social media, creating a global conversation about leadership, family, and tradition. In the modern world, news analysis in the days following focused on how successfully the ceremony had balanced ancient tradition with contemporary values. The moments that had resonated most strongly were those that showed the royal family as real people dealing with real emotions and situations. While still honoring the centuries of history they represented as King William and his family retired to their private quarters that evening, they could reflect on a day that had transformed not just their own lives but the entire relationship between the monarchy and the people it served. The crown that William had worn for the first time that morning now rested on its stand, but the responsibilities it represented would shape every day of his life going forward. The days following the coronation brought a flood of international reaction that surprised even the most optimistic palace officials. Newspapers around the world featured front-page images of King William's emotional moments, particularly the single tear during his crowning and the tender scene of him comforting his son on the balcony. These images cross cultural and language barriers, speaking to something universally human. Social media analysis revealed that the coronation had engaged demographics that traditionally showed little interest in royal events. Young people who had never posted about monarchy were sharing videos and expressing genuine admiration for what they had witnessed. The authenticity of the day had broken through the cynicism that often surrounded royal ceremonies. Within a week of the coronation, King William began his reign with visits across the United Kingdom and Commonwealth nations. The tone had been set by those emotional moments during the ceremony. Each public appearance reinforced the impression of a monarch who understood both the weight of his responsibilities and the human connections that made them meaningful. His first official visit was to a children's hospital in Manchester.
Where?
He spent hours talking with young patients and their families. The children showed no fear or formality around their new king, treating him like the caring father they had seen on their television screens. Parents were moved by his genuine interest in their stories and struggles. The visit included an unplanned moment that became characteristic of his early reign. When a young girl asked if he still felt sad like he did when he got his crown, William knelt down to her level and explained honestly that being king meant feeling many emotions, including sadness for people who were hurting. His openness created a connection that traditional royal protocol had rarely achieved. Catherine accompanied William on many of these early visits, and together they developed a natural approach to royal duties that felt refreshingly authentic. They asked real questions, listened to complete answers, and showed genuine emotion when appropriate. The public responded with warmth and respect that hadn't been seen for royal visits in decades. The children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, made carefully planned appearances that allowed them to grow into their royal roles gradually. Each appearance was designed to feel natural rather than staged, continuing the tone of authenticity that had marked their father's coronation day. International. Observers noted how different King William's approach was from traditional royal behavior. He was comfortable with casual conversation, willing to share appropriate personal experiences, and genuinely interested in learning from the people he met. This style began to influence other royal families around the world. The impact of what became known as the authentic monarchy effect continued to grow throughout William's first year as king. Tourism to Britain increased by unprecedented amounts as people wanted to visit the places where they had seen such genuine moments unfold. The coronation had created a new image of Britain that appealed to international visitors. Opinion polls showed remarkable changes in public perception of the monarchy across all age groups. The authenticity displayed during the coronation had created trust and connection that translated into genuine support for the institution. Even Republican movements in some Commonwealth nations saw their support decrease as people reconsidered their views. Royal biographers and historians began analyzing what they called the William effect on modern monarchy. The combination of honoring tradition while embracing emotional honesty had created a new model for how royal families could remain relevant in the 21st century. Other monarchies studied his approach carefully. The terror that had moved millions during the coronation ceremony became a symbol of leadership that was both strong and emotionally intelligent. Leadership experts used it as an example of how authentic emotion could enhance rather than diminish authority. It showed that strength came not from hiding feelings, but from being honest about them. Educational institutions began using the coronation as a case study in effective communication and leadership. Business schools analyzed how William's authentic approach had created stronger connections with diverse audiences than traditional formal methods. The day provided lessons that extended far beyond royal protocol. Religious leaders praised the way the ceremony had balanced ancient spiritual traditions with contemporary human values. The anointing ceremony had maintained its sacred significance, while the human moments had shown how faith and emotion could work together. Many sermons in the following months referenced the day as an example of authentic spiritual leadership. The international diplomatic benefits continued to unfold as world leaders found they had more positive and productive relationships with Britain following the coronation. The authentic emotions they had witnessed had created personal connections that translated into better cooperation on global issues. Commonwealth meetings during William's first year as king had a notably different atmosphere than in previous years. Nations that had been considering leaving the Commonwealth found renewed reasons to remain connected. The personal bonds formed during the coronation visits had strengthened political relationships across the organization. Social media platforms reported that content related to the coronation continued to be shared months after the event. New audiences discovered the videos and images regularly, with each wave of sharing creating fresh discussions about leadership, its authenticity, and the role of tradition in modern society. The legacy of that single tear shed during the crowning moment became a touchstone for discussions about masculine leadership and emotional intelligence. It showed that real strength came from being willing to show genuine feeling in moments of great responsibility. This lesson resonated with leaders in many different fields. Years later, historians examining King William V's reign would consistently return to his coronation day as the foundation of his successful monarchy. The genuine emotion he had shown had demonstrated character qualities that resonated across all walks of life. The ceremony had proved that ancient institutions could evolve while maintaining their essential dignity and purpose. The image of King William comforting his crying child while wearing the crown of office became one of the most iconic photographs in royal history. It perfectly captured the balance he would maintain throughout his reign between formal duty and human connection. This balance would define not just his kingship, but his entire approach to leadership. The coronation had accomplished something that decades of traditional public relations could not achieve. It had shown the monarchy to be both historically significant and personally relevant. The authentic emotions displayed throughout the day had created genuine connections between the royal family and people around the world. King William had begun his reign not just as a monarch, but as a man his people could truly respect and connect with on a deeply human level. The crown and the tear had become symbols of a new kind of leadership that honored the past, while embracing the authentic human connections that would guide the future.